In this video, we'll talk about rest of the two types of loops, while loop and do while loop. And after that, I'll tell you about the nested loops as there was a question based on this in the last video. So I'll have to cover that in this video only. So let's start. As you can see, this is the syntax of while loop. All those things that we can do using for loops can be done using while loops also. So it's totally your choice, whatever you are comfortable with. I usually use for loop since I am more comfortable with that, but it's totally your choice, whatever you want to choose. So as we have seen in for loop, we do the initialization, then we put condition, and then we update the variable. In the same way, initialization, condition, and updatation are done in while loop also, but in different statements. Let's change this for loop to while loop. But before that, let's first run this program and see what's the output. Let's enter 7 and it says hello fearless coders 7 times. Now let's change this for to while. For that, I'll have to remove this for and replace it with while. Then I don't need this initialization here, so I'm removing this. And I can do the initialization anywhere before using the while loop, so I'm doing it here. It's the same thing. Now I don't need the updatation here, so I'm removing this, and you can do the updatation here or you can do it after printf. It's your choice. Now it's done and it should produce the same output as the output was in for loop. So let's run it and let's give the same input 7 and the output is the same. So what we can infer from this is that while and for loops give the same output and that's why they can be used interchangeably. It's just your choice and your preference what you want to do. Now, there are some situations when you want your program to run at least once and you may or may not know how many times that loop is going to be run. In that case, we prefer using do while. I'm not saying that you can't use for or while loops in such situations, but do while loop is a little easier to use. Now let's remove these lines and let's code for do while. For that, first I'll declare a variable int, an integer int which will store the value entered by the user. Then I'll start the do while loop. Inside do while, first I'll prompt the user to enter a number. Then I'll scan the number and I'll store it in n. Then I'll keep on prompting and scanning the number while n is anything but not 0. And when it is 0, the program will come out of the loop and it will print anything. Let's say it prints congrats. And let's run this and see what happens. Enter number, let's enter any random number. Again enter number, again. Now let's enter 0 this time. Congrats. These are two blocks of codes. One uses while and the second uses do while loop. You have to find out what is the difference between these two blocks of codes by writing two different programs. So now you know what are conditional statements and what are loops. Also, you have done nested if-else statements. So what does nesting mean? Nesting is anything where information is organized in layers. In simple words, if any object contains another object of same type, then it is nesting. For example, if an if condition is present inside another if, then it is nested if. If for loop is present inside another for loop, then it is nested for. And if a function is present inside another function, then it is a nested function. You'll study about function in later videos. I had given you some patterns in the previous video. Let's code the first one. So this is the first pattern. This pattern is a square of hashes with 4 hashes on each side. To make this pattern, what we do is we first print a single hash. Then we run a loop for 4 times which prints the hash 4 times. Then we run another loop which prints the whole line 4 times. And this is the way how this pattern is made. So let's try making the pattern. First, I'm defining two variables I and j, which will be used inside the two for loops. Then what I need to do first is I need to print a hash here. Then I need to print this hash for 4 times. So I'm running a for loop which runs for 4 times. Now let's try running this loop and see what happens. It's printing hash for 4 times. Now what I need to do is I need to print this 4 hashes 4 times so that it makes a square. For that I'll put these two lines inside another for loop. So let's insert a tab here for indentation and let's make another for loop which uses j and it also runs for 4 times. Then curly braces, and inside this curly braces I have to cut and paste these two lines. Also I need an enter after every time this for loop runs so that the next 4 hashes comes to the next line. So I'll print \n here which acts as an enter. And yeah, it's done. This is the exercise for this video. After you have made all the 6 patterns, you have to make a program which works like this. It is waiting for the user to enter a number, let's say 7, and when the user enters it, it will generate a pattern which has 7 columns and 7 rows. Let's say the user entered 11. Then it will generate a pattern which has 11 columns and 11 rows.